and welcome to another edition of the Hank Unplugged Podcast, a podcast that is committed to bringing the most interesting, informative, and inspirational people on the planet directly to your earbuds. And, you know, I've had a whole list of these incredible women on podcasts over the last several months, and today will be no exception. Today on the podcast, I have an incredible woman named Peachy Keenan. Actually, that's a pseudonym. I'm going to ask her about that in a minute, but she is a writer. She's a mother, and probably her greatest asset is the fact that she's a mother. She lives deep behind enemy lines, and she identifies as a catch this, a husbosexual. Mm-hmm. I'm going to let her explain that to you. She gave up a career writing for corporate behemoths so that she could devote herself to her family, and she calls herself, the title of the book, she calls herself a domestic extremist. And this book is a practical guide to winning the culture war. And we've talked about this culture war, the woke war in Western civilization, in which you have a false dichotomy between the oppressed and the oppressor, in which kids are the primary target, in which extremism is the new watchword of the day. In fact, we did an article, not an article, but an entire journal, Christian Research Journal, The War on Western Civilization, everything you need to know about the cult of wokeism. That also available for anyone who stands shoulder to shoulder with us in the battle for life and truth. But we're talking about a book that I think is extremely important. Peachy has the ability to use humor in a powerful way. And I thought about this a lot because when you think about the LGBTQ, the alphabet soup, plus revolution, it started with humor. You started to laugh. You saw sitcoms that caused you to laugh. So she now has turned the table and is using humor in a very effective way to debunk and to destroy a worldview that is literally destroying Western civilization. So I am just delighted to have Peachy Keenan on the Hank Unplugged podcast. Hi, Peachy.
Hi, how are you?
I'm doing great. I love to see your smiling face.
It's great to be here. Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, so I was going to ask you, how do you have the temerity to use humor for such a serious subject?
Yeah, how dare I try to make people laugh? I came out of, that world of, I'm a former liberal, I'm a former feminist, and, I was very deep into pop culture and entertainment. I love all that stuff. And I couldn't help but notice that is a very effective way to communicate with an audience. One of my old heroes, my childhood heroes, Johnny Carson, he would kind of bring the country together under really a consensus based on what he would make a joke about. And then he would make it okay for other people to have that opinion about some politician, and everyone could laugh at it. And then we'd move on. And it was like unity through humor. And so it is an effective weapon. There's another reason I use humor. Well, first of all, that's just who I am. That's my personality. Okay, for better or worse. But the left is very good and very smart at using mockery because they recognize, this goes back to Saul Alinsky, his rules for radicals, that mockery is really very hard to defend when it's directed towards you, and personal biting attacks. I mean, I don't like to be mean, obviously, but to mock certain ideologies, certain beliefs, mock ridiculous things that are harmful to us, we should be using mockery. We should call it out as what it is, as ridiculous. And I also believe that the side that is having the most fun in the end will win. If we can make it fun to be one of us, we're not school marms, we're not going to wrap you on the knuckles with a ruler if you make a mistake. We can just make it more fun. And I think that young people on the right are having a lot of fun sharing memes. And so, I wanted my message is serious. But I wanted it to go down with a spoonful of sugar.
So you're not one of the characters in The Handmaid's Tale.
Exactly. Nope.
So I'm going to ask you the most obvious question. What is a domestic extremist?
Right. Yeah, I mean, I like to joke that I'm not a domestic extremist. I'm just extremely domestic. But this idea really came out of once I kind of had too many children for my neighbors. They would notice I was having another baby. Uh-oh, or that I was going to mass with my children, or that I was, we were not going to public school. We were kind of already kind of withdrawing ourselves from mainstream American culture. And people started to look at me and treat me like I was some sort of actual extremist, like I was some fringe radical, for having literally 3 children. I have more than 3 now, for converting to Catholicism, for deciding to quit my corporate job at the giant woke corporation so that I could nurse my baby. That was considered radical and really weird. And women especially, would judge me, would criticize me, would say, why are you doing that? Like, how could you be doing that? So I did start to feel like I was some kind of extremist. And then we can see all around us, the FBI and the DOJ are calling parent groups who protest, the woke curriculum, the sex ed or whatever, they're being called literal domestic terrorists. So I think that it's apt that we are, just by being domestic people, by being moms and dads, we are actually literally being considered domestic extremists, but we're just extremely domestic. It's okay. Don't be afraid of us.
Your subtitle is intriguing as well. I love the title of the book. It draws you in immediately. But the subtitle, A Practical Guide to Winning the Culture War. The first thing that comes to my mind is, do you think we're too far along to win the culture war? If you read your book, you're saying absolutely not. We can win this culture war.
Yeah, people ask me that a lot. When you put in the subtitle of your book, people expect you to have an answer. And I mean, I do think it's important to stay positive. I mean, if I thought it was over and that we lost and the left won, I mean, what would be the point, of anything? What would be the point of having another baby, getting up in the morning, trying to homeschool your children? We would just all kind of quit and give up. It was over. So we have to, be happy warriors, and we have to hope that, yes, we can make a difference. I do believe that there's enormous strength in our numbers. We're not going to go quietly into that good night. They can't put us all in the gulag, even if they try, or the digital gulag, or silence all of us. So my book is really about, well, how do we increase our numbers? How do we make sure that young couples can have the family size they want, maybe an extra child or 2? And then, most importantly, make sure that their children are not caught in the kind of woke spider web, and they don't get kind of sucked away to the dark side. Make sure that your own children will one day hope to have their own families and protect them from all of these kind of nefarious influences. So by doing that incrementally, yes, we absolutely can win. I mean, there was a New York Times article 2 days ago about humanity is going to peak in 50 years and there'll be a rapid decline in our population, which is not good. But even the article, buried deep in the article, it said if only like 1 out of every 5 couples has 1 extra kid in this country, that disaster can be averted. So there is like a sea change we can make now that in a generation will, in fact, enable us to win. But it requires people to actually get the message.
There are prominent pastors. I think of Oliver Buzz Thomas, a prominent Baptist pastor who is criticizing people like me for having 12 children.
How dare you?
How dare you?
Yeah.
And you're saying exactly the opposite. I should be one of your heroes, of course. My wife should, at least.
Wow, 12 kids is beautiful. I love it.
Well, we have 9 natural and 3 adopted.
Wow, incredible. What a blessing.
Yeah. And you're saying that's the way to go.
Yeah. I mean, obviously, parenthood is a calling. And I'm not saying, and I would never say, that every single person, every single adult must have X number of children. No, that's not what I'm saying at all. There's always going to be people who choose childlessness. There's people who are unfortunately, they're tragically are infertile. They can't have the children they want. There's always going to be people who don't ever meet a partner and they're not able to have children. I get all of that totally. My point is that the people who do manage to find a decent partner, who decide to take the leap into marriage, and who do it when they're still young enough to have more than 2 children should be encouraged and celebrated and really enticed into expressing their fertility. Don't stop at 1 or 2. I mean, I live here in California, in Southern California, and it really does feel like there's a law against having more than 2 children. You can't have more children that can fit in the back seat of the Range Rover. You know what I mean? But people should not. People feel constrained for climate change reasons, economic reasons. I get all of that. What I'm saying is, if we can peel off just a few more young families and encourage them to have the child that they want, the child that they will regret not having one day, because trust me, I hear that all the time. You know, I wish I'd had one more. I didn't want one, and my husband didn't want one. Then I think we can win. Not everybody is called like you to 12. Or like me to 5. I understand that. But I think that there is a lot of opportunity for people who maybe only have 1 and aren't sure to have a second, or have 2 and want a third.
Yeah, I want to talk about that a little more later on, but I always say that contrast is the conduit to clarity. And you make the contrast between 2 words that are alliterated, feminism and feminine. I want you to talk about that a little bit. I think that's a brilliant contrast. Feminism has been a blight to our culture. You're talking about the superpower that a female has, and a superpower that is jettisoned as though it has no real value in the minds of so many people.
Yeah, it's really true. Feminism has sort of replaced kind of natural, innate femininity. And I think that feminists have convinced women that their natural, innate femininity, and by femininity, I don't mean you like to wear pink and you like to wear, lace and ruffles. That's not really what I'm talking about. I'm talking about femininity is just like being the woman that you were born, letting your femaleness express itself naturally. Which can take the form of maternity oftentimes, wanting to attract a mate, wanting to, when you're young, to look your best, to try to attract a mate. This is not the patriarchy telling us what to do. You have to adhere to this beauty standard. This is Mother Nature designing us to attract a mate and to become monogamous when we're still young enough to reproduce. This is just part of the natural world. And that's what I mean by being feminine. And feminism has replaced that. They ripped out femininity and replaced it with feminism as like an upgrade, but it has really been a major downgrade to women. When beauty standards are out, then we have a huge rise in obesity. We have a huge rise in young women who feel like power. I'm empowered. That means I have to, shave my head or dye my hair weird colors or pierce my body or cover myself in tattoos, because that's empowering, to not look like in their head, a stereotypical woman. And then femininity also tells women that, no, your greatest value is not in the home, is not as a female. Your greatest value to society is what you do for a living. What are you doing for the economy? What is your economic worth versus your female worth? And so that's why we have women who dive into their career, and that becomes how they get all the, social media affirmation, all the likes, all the praise, how wonderful, how heroic they are. That's sort of the girl bossism that has taken hold. And what that does is makes you basically run out the clock on your femininity, i.e. on your fertility. And you have women who they give all their good years to their boss. And when they finally realize, oh, well, maybe I do want a child, their eggs the frozen eggs are expired, and they have to undergo massive amounts of reproductive technology, is the kind of euphemistic term for pretty barbaric and expensive modes of having children. And they end up with, in their middle age, really suffering a lot. So I think it has been a blight. It has broken up families. It's made men kind of irrelevant to women's happiness and to family formation. And so, yeah, my advice is to become an anti-feminist, to just reject it totally and become instead a domestic extremist.
I want you to expand on that a little bit. I think this is such an important subject, and I'm not sure that everybody is hip to it. The fact that a woman is born with a set amount of eggs, the fact that at a particular point in life, around 29, those eggs become less and less efficacious. Women are induced to stay in the workforce. Then they have this natural urge to have children. They find out that they can have children. And you make the quip in the book that, then they go to these fertility clinics. No wonder you see fertility doctors driving around in $400,000 cars. Yeah, that's right. It's an industry. And there's an intention here.
It's an incredibly lucrative industry. They are quite happy to keep you on the track of relying on reproductive technology for your future family, because that is the most expensive route to go. You will pay with your health, with your emotional well-being. You may end up heartbroken at the end, but the doctors are very, very happy. And the cryogenic clinics are quite happy to take your money. In the course of writing the book, the chapter on, the fertility and the egg donation industry, you read, it's pretty horrifying. I mean, egg freezing, for example, has become kind of like a required benefit at big companies in their HR department. So they'll entice women because we'll pay for your egg freezing. So you can come to work and you're 32, you're single, don't worry about it, because they're not doing it to liberate you from your fertility. They're doing it to keep you shackled to your job. The last thing they want is a woman going off on maternity leave and not coming back, which happens quite often, especially in the higher paid, the higher pressure jobs, corporate lawyers. Those women often will have a baby and they'll think, I'm not going back, because they usually have a high earning husband. They're not, they don't necessarily need the money. So I know many, many female lawyers who quit once they had their children, and that hurts the company bottom line. So they want to freeze your eggs so you can feel like this false promise that one day, whenever I feel like it, when I'm 40, 41, I can unfreeze my eggs. But what you're not going to just magically unfreeze a fully formed family. You're not unfreezing toddlers. You're going to unfreeze eggs. You still need to get a sperm donor if you don't have a partner. Who is that person? Then you have to go through an IVF process. One thing women forget when they get lured into free egg freezing is, well, you can't freeze your body. You can't freeze your uterus. You're going to still have to get pregnant at 40 or 41 or 45. That is very difficult. Whether your eggs are frozen or not frozen, it becomes very difficult to get pregnant in your late 30s, early 40s. I mean, some women are blessed with natural fertility. I did have a baby naturally in my early 40s, but you can't rely on that. It will not happen for you. And there's obviously higher rates of, Down syndrome and all the rest of it. So you're going to have to get a sperm donor, and then you're going to have to undergo IVF, which is very painful and has a very low chance of success. Something like, what is it? I have it in my book, 7% or 12% of all IVF cycles result in a live birth. So you're going to have to undergo that 3 or 4 times. It's a very painful process. They pump you full of hormones, and you have a very low chance of success. You may end up having to use a surrogate, a gestational surrogate, to carry your frozen egg and the sperm donor's child. That surrogate, the company does not pay for. That will cost you another $50K. By the time you get your child, you will be grandma mom. And so the whole process is really extraordinary that we've tricked these women. It's really trickery. Not to mention, I go into this also in the book, the kind of duplicitous, really disgusting methods of enticing young women to sell their eggs. So if you don't freeze your eggs are bad, you don't have any more eggs, you can buy eggs. A lot of infertile couples buy eggs. Gay men, single gay men and gay men in couples will buy eggs. And it's really a weird form of eugenics, where you are really truly designing a baby. On the egg donation websites, you can scroll through a long list of very, very specific racial categories, which you do not ever find on, let's say, a college application. I think it's very interesting. There's like 1 million categories for different kinds of, white donor women. Every European country you can name. There are very few, I looked it up, African-American egg donors. And so, I mean, is this industry racist? Is this white supremacy being perpetuated? It's very interesting, but they won't talk about that because these are mostly, people on the left, liberals who are buying all of these eggs. And the women who donate their eggs are doing it to pay off college debt. So how convenient that they're all in such horrible college debt and have to resort to this. Basically, it is, to me, a form of prostitution. You're selling your body, but even worse is you're selling basically your future children. And then there are these awful horror stories of egg donor regret. So these are women who, when they were 22, sold their eggs for $10,000, and the procedure triggered infertility. So now they cannot have any of their own children, but they do have live children. They are the biological mother of live children who exist, who were born to someone who bought those eggs. They will never meet those children. They will never see photos of those children. Those children will never see a picture of that woman's face. And that is a real thing that happens. And it's the idea that this is all liberating. This all is to free women. The battlefield is now littered with the victims of feminism, of reproductive technology. And no one is really giving a thought to the children who are victimized by this, the young women who are victimized by this. And those sections of my book, obviously those are serious things and they're not really a laughing matter. But I think it's really great to just shine a light on it, because I think people just aren't allowed to really talk about that. And so I'm really proud that I was able to write about that in the book.
Well, I'm proud of what you just did, because this is one of the most succinct elaborations on the subject I've ever heard. I think it is it's worth the price of admission.